Good morning, afternoon, or wherever you are. Welcome to a joint webcast put on by our good friends at AvePoint and Rackspace. My name is Jon Ross. I'll be moderating this lively discussion, but the topic of today's webinar is going to be what is cloud and its impact on the future of SharePoint. So we're going to start off, I think a lot of the reasons why we started wanted to do something like this is wanted to get some folks together from the community that are familiar with having some of these conversations about cloud and about SharePoint. And you know, I interact with a lot of these guys on a pretty frequent basis, and I think we have some really great conversations. And I kind of thought to myself, hey, wouldn't it be great if we got all these people together and we recorded it, and we kind of were able to share some of these conversations we had with the rest of the world and share our perspective with everybody that's out there. So as we go through the webinar, you'll notice at the bottom of the screen that there's a series of questions. Please feel free to go ahead and ask questions of the panel. As we go through the presentation, I'm going to be making sure that we kind of go through everybody, and we're going to try to answer as many questions as we can. So want to keep this as interactive as possible, at least, you know, through questions and everything. So if there's anything you're dying to know, or your boss is asking you to do research or whatever, you know, we can help you out here, give you a jump start on some of that stuff. But without further ado, let's kind of get started a little bit. Like I said, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to be moderating this discussion. My name is Jon Ross. I'm a technical product manager at Rackspace, also a SharePoint MVP. Please feel free to reach out to me and take a look at my blog, or probably an easier way to reach out to me would be over on Twitter, and say hi. And you know, if you have any questions as we go through the webinar, please feel free to tweet at me, or just generally tweet out to the world, and you know, talk about some of the things that we're discussing here in the webinar. And then on to our panelists. The first panelist I'm actually going to introduce is our good friend Dux. Dux is actually over in Saudi Arabia at the moment, and he's a little bit he's kind of dealing with some internet issues right now, but he will be dialing in as soon as he can. But Dux is Chief Technology Officer over at AvePoint for the public sector. He's MVP and does all kind of great stuff. Very active on social media. So make sure, if you're not already following Dux, give him a follow at Meet Dux over on Twitter. All right, hopping over to my colleague Jeff DeVerter. Jeff, why don't I've done enough talking. Why don't you talk about yourself?
Be happy to. Thank you, Jon. So my name is Jeff DeVerter, and I'm over here at Rackspace. And I came to Rackspace almost 7 years ago, and it was to build the SharePoint offering that Rackspace has today, and that was all around providing dedicated infrastructure to create single-tenant, just like an enterprise-grade SharePoint deployment that we would make available then to our customers. And that's grown up over the years. I'm now involved more in building up Microsoft private clouds, as well as helping that from a SharePoint perspective, and anxious to join in this conversation today and talk about how all things from a private cloud and the public cloud are impacting the future of SharePoint.
Awesome. Good to have you, Jeff. All right. Jon Peluso.
Hey, everybody. This is Jon Peluso. I'm the Vice President of Product Management here at AvePoint. So have a lot of insight into the various product lines of the DocAv platform, as well as our governance and compliance platforms. Do a lot of talking out with customers about their current deployments and supporting them, as well as what they're looking to do in the future. So obviously, lately, that's a lot of talk about if and how they could leverage cloud. And to the point of the webinar, what cloud means to them, because it's not just one flavor, as I'm sure we'll end up talking about today.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Todd, why don't you say a couple things, and you know, remember, let's try to keep this under 20 minutes, okay?
Who is that handsome, thoughtful devil there on the screen? That's a glamour shot, professionally taken shot. No, I kid. So I'm Todd Clint. I'm a SharePoint MVP as well. I work at Rackspace. I was forced to come to work at Rackspace when they bought the consulting company that I worked at, SharePoint 911. That happened 3 years ago. I've cursed them every day since. No, I'm kidding. It's a great place. I've known Jeff for years and years, long before I worked at Rackspace, and I only do SharePoint, and I'm a SharePoint admin and IT pro kind of guy. And before coming on board with Rackspace, I was sort of against this whole cloud thing. It meant I was going to have to get a real job. But now, having been at Rackspace for a few years and seeing where stuff's going, I think this cloud thing, I think it might take off. I think it's got some legs, and I'm pretty excited to be a part of it.
Awesome. Always a pleasure, Todd. So now is the time. Like I mentioned before, we want a lot of the questions throughout this webinar to come from everybody out in the audience here. So feel free to ask some questions. We do have on our side, as you ask questions, we see them come up. Right now, I don't have any questions, so don't be shy, everybody. We won't bite. But you know, any event that we don't get any questions, I have plenty of great questions that we can all talk about. So let's get started now. So I wanted to start off with what I would consider one of the biggest questions, at least that I hear and I deal with. I imagine that our panel here, that you know, is so diverse, it probably hears this on many different levels. But you know, we hear about this thing cloud all the time, and I think a lot of times people, when they hear cloud, I think it's marketed in such a way that everybody thinks cloud is one thing, or when you hear cloud, it refers to, you know, a specific answer. So I would ask you guys as the panel, you know, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that customers have about cloud? And we'll start with Jeff DeVerter, because I know that this has always been something that's been near and dear to your heart.
Oh, I was just raising my hand going, please pick me, please pick me. Yeah, so what is cloud? You know, people think there's so many misconceptions because there's so much money being spent on, hey, come to my cloud. No, come to my cloud. But when you think about cloud, in the most general definition of it, it's not in my data center, right? It means that whatever I've chosen to run here, and our topic's around SharePoint, it just means SharePoint, not my data center. Where it's not my data center, where is it? It must be in the cloud. That sounds magical. And so we really need to put some definition around what that stuff is. So in my introduction, I talked about how I came to Rackspace to build the single tenant stuff for SharePoint, because, you know, at this point, this is still pre-O365. It was I've even forgotten what its old name was. But it was, you know, there was a shared offering from Microsoft. And there were a couple other smaller companies out there that had shared offerings as well. But what that meant when we said shared offerings, it meant that we had one big SharePoint deployment, and that one big SharePoint deployment held all the different customers. And that's a definition of cloud. That's what I'd call a multi-tenant cloud. And multi-tenant's a scary word. Most of us think about it when we think about apartments or places where you live where there's more than one person. And that's actually a really good analogy, because a multi-tenant place where you live, an apartment, let's say, is a common structure, and inside of that common structure we have different doors that go into different apartments, and those doors have their own unique security. But once you're inside, it's sort of your own place. You can put the sofa on whatever wall you want. You can maybe even paint the kitchen if you wanted a different color. But the reality is if you want the outside of your building to be pink and polka dotted, you can't change that color. You can't change that color because you don't own the outside of the building. You don't own the infrastructure. And so when you think about that in the SharePoint terms, what you have is one common set of SharePoint binaries that's making SharePoint run. And that SharePoint has got to run great for all of the tenants, whether it's 10 or 10,000 that run inside of there. So there are certain things you can do. You can create bunches of sites. You can do some customizations inside of there to give it a theme that you would want it to have, to put web parts where you would want the web parts to be. But you're not going to be able to deploy custom code in most cases that's going to allow it to give it very unique custom functionality, or set another server next door to it so that it could be doing some kind of custom business processing. So multi-tenant, while it can be cost-effective, definitely comes with some limitations. And so a dedicated environment is going to allow you to do whatever you want to do to it because you're the only customer who's there. Now, both of these are definitions of cloud because you have other people managing the infrastructure for you and making it available, quote, as a service. But it just comes in a couple different flavors, whether it is a dedicated or single-tenant deployment, or whether it would be a multi-tenant shared deployment. How's that, John?
So it was good. I want to make sure. I want to clarify something that you said just to make sure everybody kind of picked up on it. And I know what you're saying because we've talked about this endlessly. But when you were talking about cloud, I know one of the things that we've talked about is you've defined cloud as basically running your infrastructure on somebody else's servers, whether that's, in an Office 365 type setting or running, you have physical servers that are running in Rackspace's data center. Those are both cloud, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and so in terms of the different flavors and what it is that you're trying to accomplish, one may work for you than others, and I think so. We're starting to get some questions coming in, but let me ask Jon Peluso, what from your perspective in going out and talking with customers, what are some of the biggest misconceptions you see from customers about cloud?
Yeah, so I think Jeff's analogy was really a great one, and one of the slides that I have in a deck that I use sometimes to try to explain this is this evolution, right? So way back in the old days when I, was working and I had to go visit our Exchange server to kick it or reboot it for the 7th time, that week. Where would you go? I would go into the server closet, right? So we all had these server closets. And then we evolved and we moved our servers into data centers, right? So we've been at this game of moving the location of our architecture for a long time now. So we've moved it from the server closet into a data center that we rented space in, right? And maybe the team in the data center was responsible for some parts of the maintenance, and we were responsible maybe for the OS and things like that. And now this extension to the cloud is simply, again, less and less responsibility for that architecture. Maybe now someone else owns all of the architecture, including the OS, and I just own the app and its configuration. Or maybe I don't even own the app itself, right? The basic underlying operation of the app and its updates, like SharePoint, is owned by someone else, and my job is just to populate the application. So this is this isn't really a huge jump if you look at the process that's been happening. So as people are, oh my God, how could I not have control over this or control over that? We've been giving away control slowly, over time as we see fit, and it just has to make sense for the organization. What's interesting to me is if we look at something like information rights management, right, in SharePoint. Very powerful feature, becoming even more powerful, and I think probably deployed not that widely. So everybody has the need. It's not deployed very widely. Why? Well, it takes some expertise to get that set up. It takes some expertise to maintain that underlying architecture. And I think that's really one of the benefits of the cloud. I can use these advanced services because rather than relying on myself for the expertise to get it set up and to maintain it, I can rely on others. That's the definition of a service, right? So I can have Rackspace maintain that functionality for me. I don't have to worry about it, right? I don't need to have that expertise in-house, but I get to leverage the benefit of it. So I think it's, a lot of times the cloud is being seen as giving away something, giving away control, but really, if we do it right and if it's appropriate, we're actually gaining things. We're actually gaining additional expertise and resources.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to some of the questions actually that we're getting that are coming in. Someone asked the question: security and ownership of data is a big concern that they're asked about frequently. And I think when we talk about cloud, I know I hear about that all the time. And Todd, I know every time whenever we're working on internal efforts and everything like that, I know security ends up being, first and foremost in what we talk about. But, from a security and ownership of data perspective in the cloud, from an IT pro perspective, why don't you talk about that?
So that pre-Rackspace, before I had the glorious job that I have today at Rackspace, and I was a lonely internal guy, whenever these cloud or hosting discussions would come up, that would be one of the first things that I would use to shoot them down, was security. I don't want all my data going across the internet and going into somebody's, server somewhere that I don't understand. That was one of the easy ways I could use to shoot it down. But now that I've been on the other side, security is way different than I thought. And as a person with a social security number and a credit history, I value security a great deal because I know what those folks out there are doing with it. But one of the things that I have seen in my time at Rackspace is our security folks. And our security folks are crazy good. These guys live and breathe security. These guys are, they're security geeks like I'm a SharePoint geek. And it dawned on me at one point that if I was an internal guy, if I worked for a small company, it was like 100, 200 people, and I had a guy that ran servers and fixed printers and, turned the mouse and put it on the right side of the keyboard for people and happened to also do security, that my security probably wasn't as good as I thought that it was. This illusion that I could just go yank the cord, the internet cord if something went haywire, was false sense of security. And so when you host, especially if you host at places like Rackspace, now you've got a team of people who do nothing but security, and I think they're probably better at it than the guy that just happens to do security at your company. And that's one of the things that I've talked to people about. I'm like, did your guys read security blogs and get security emails and that kind of stuff? And I feel a lot better about cloud things having seen the other side of it now. So again, while I'm very protective of my social security number, it's very near and dear to me, I don't get freaked out about that now when I know that stuff's out in the cloud.
So Todd, while you're talking, I want to get to some of the other questions that people are asking, and I think this one is tailor made for you. Someone asked, is there a list of features that you will lose by moving from on-prem to the cloud? And I would say that I think that question, I think that question kind of speaks to something that Jeff was talking about earlier, is that the cloud means a lot of things. So in some cases, you can really run on-prem in the cloud. So when you talk about, what features will you lose, more specifically, you're saying what features would you lose between on-prem meaning non-Office 365, on-prem meaning non-Office 365 builds, and Office 365. So is there a list where you can go to kind of figure out where the difference is in features?
There is. Let me speak to your point a little bit. The folks at Microsoft, and I love them dearly. They've kept food in my belly for about 15 years now. Love them to death. But to believe their marketing, you would think the cloud means Office 365, and I disagree with that. While Office 365 is a great product and certainly a big part of the cloud, like you said, the cloud can be other things. And so when somebody asks me the question, what will I lose when I move to the cloud? My response back is what part of the cloud are you going to? Because the answer is different depending on where you're going. So Microsoft does have a document somewhere, and I don't have the URL memorized, that compares on-prem SharePoint, the different versions of that, enterprise, standard, and all that, with the different Office 365 SKUs, so you can see exactly what things each one does and doesn't have. But then, like you said, you can also do stuff like host on-prem SharePoint at Rackspace. So it's kind of the best of two worlds. You get to have your chocolate and your peanut butter. You get all of the functionality of on-prem SharePoint, but none of the hassle, none of the pain of actually keeping SharePoint going. And I know as an IT guy, sometimes I would enjoy going into the server room and actually physically kicking something. You do lose that by putting stuff in hosted or cloud, but you can also you can get another computer and go kick it, or get an intern or something like that. But if people are worried about losing functionality when going to the cloud, I think that means they haven't explored their cloud options well enough.
Yeah, and I'll just add that.
So here's a funny story, actually. Here's a really funny story. So when AvePoint's completely hosted offering for Office 365 management went live, the very first customer that we had, right? We have all this cool functionality for replicating content back and forth and all kinds of stuff, and integrating different workloads. We all know the buzzwords, right? The very first licenses we sold for our all-in Office 365 management product was, take a guess,
backup. Microsoft?
Backup.
Oh.
So here we have a cloud-hosted, right, SharePoint. Part of the advantage of the Office 365 platform as pitched is, hey, you don't have to worry about any of that infrastructure concern. And the very first customer that we got, they were interested in, I don't trust Microsoft is going to back this up appropriately with the right SLA, so I want another solution. So I think that's another thing as well, right? So it doesn't have to be a trade-off. You can figure out where the gaps are. And I know, just looking at some of the questions, one of the areas of concern is a little bit of this loss of control is, wow, what if I eventually wanted to get out of this? What if I try it for a couple of years and then want to get away from this? The bottom line is, Microsoft may not make it easy for you to get out of an Office 365, scenario. They're not going to ship you your content databases, I'm quite sure. But, there are options for migrating your content away from Office 365. So I think knowing what's out there can help ease a little bit of that knee-jerk reaction as well.
Yeah, and I think I'll just say, I think that we always talk about things like they're all different tools in the cloud tool belt, and I know that cloud stuff's hard. That's part of the reason why we're having this webinar to talk about this stuff, because I think that there's a lot of information out there, and it's easy to get confused with. I know our Rackspace marketing people have given me a hard time before because of the terminology that's collectively used by Microsoft is kind of different from the terminology that we use at Rackspace. And they try to tell me, they're like, oh, you're using the term wrong. I'm like, no, I'm using it consistently with, how our markets use it, which is also different from how other people, and it's just, everybody knows there's some confusion. So let me answer a quick question that I saw come up. Someone asked the panel, they said, are there plans in the future to be able to log into more than one Office 365 session from the same browser? And so I'll just answer that I don't know if that's going to be possible, but there is a trick that if you use if you're using Chrome, IE, or Firefox or any other browser, they all usually have some sort of like in private kind of mode or anonymous mode or whatever. And it is possible to actually be logged in using that mode into multiple sessions because it kind of doesn't store the cookie information. So for some of us who are presenting on some of these topics, that's one of the things that we use so we can be logged into multiple environments. So if you're trying to figure out how you can do that, that's kind of just a little pro tip, but I'm not sure if there's any better answer. So let's we've got about 168 people that are in here now. So I'm gonna really throw some chum into the water right now. Got a question from somebody that says, do you guys believe Microsoft will abandon on-premises SharePoint or hybrid environments and force people to adopt entirely cloud-based SharePoint? How do you guys believe it will affect the healthcare industry, specifically hospitals, which have to adhere to HIPAA privacy? So, Jeff, I know, what do you think about this? I know there's a big announcement. Julia White put out a blog post yesterday. What do you think, what do you think the future of on-premises versus Office 365 looks like?
So do I think that Microsoft will, or do I think that they want to? Do I think they want to? I think they would love to. It allows a lot more control on their side, right? And they like that. But the reality is the person who asked the question asked it perfectly, and that is, there are a lot of industries out there that can't go to a big shared something, and they have to have levels of control that meet their own industry's requirements. And it's smart to think about, not just think of this from the application perspective. There are a few layers you have to think through. First of all is, what data center is it going into? Does that data center meet my requirements? Second to that is, do the personnel, are there specific requirements over the people who touch my gear that make that run? And then am I allowed to do this in a shared environment, or does it have to be dedicated? And then, then lastly, where can it lie? So do I think Microsoft wants to have a single code base running in their cloud somewhere? I think they would love that. Nothing would make them happier. But the reality is, and is evidence this week, that 16 is coming to both on-prem as well as 365. And by the way, on-prem doesn't just mean, we've said this sort of in and out today, doesn't just mean in your data center. A dedicated deployment at a Rackspace-like provider is going to give you the same on-prem security. You just have to consider their data centers as well and any requirements you might have. But you can get a single tenant dedicated. I'd prefer to refer to it as that version of 16 as it's coming out. What's going to happen on the next one, 17, 18, 19? Who knows? I'm just thrilled that there's going to be a 16 that dedicated deployments will have. So for the foreseeable future, we're good to go.
Cool. Hey, I see 6 presenters dialed in. Does that mean Dux is here now?
Yes, sir. I'm in.
Hey, Dux. This is say hi to everybody.
Hey, everybody. Forgive me for me being late here. Got caught up in the Riyadh traffic, but pleasure to be here.
So I think I don't know if you heard the question, but I think this is a great one. I'd love to hear everybody weigh in on. But our good friend Julia White announced a blog post yesterday that talked about kind of the roadmap for Office 365, as well as I think for the first time very directly about saying there's going to be a next version of on-premises SharePoint Server 2016. So the question was about there's still a lot of there's still a lot of industries. I know you work in a lot with the public sector. The question that the person asked was about hospitals and things like that. What do you think? What do you think about Microsoft's view on Office 365 versus on-premises? Are they gonna try to push 100% of people to Office 365, or do you think that or how do you view what the mix is going to look like in the coming years?
That's a fantastic question. So just to answer that off the bat is I don't think, at least I can say in my opinion, the next 3 to 5 years, SharePoint on-premise won't go away. And I don't think that's the intent of Microsoft to totally kill on-prem and just tell everybody to go into cloud, because that's not realistic. As you mentioned, I work a lot in the public sector industry around the globe. In fact, I'm here in Riyadh today working with some government agencies for a lot of different types of initiatives, and a lot of it involves SharePoint. And in all my meetings today and conversations today, there's only one conversation around the cloud, Office 365, and in fact, that conversation is even around hybrid. So I think the way the landscape would look is if you look at large customers, enterprise customers, or those that are in the public sector or highly compliant industry, be it healthcare, financial sector, while obviously the option of the cloud is there, the investment around on-premise would continue on. Now, the good news is recently I worked with a bank. They're actually looking into a hybrid model where their Office 365 environment would serve more of a collaborative environment where internal collaboration would take place, but more importantly, also looking at Office 365 as a means to do external collaboration. So I think it will progress where larger organizations would look at hybrid as an option, but just taking the cloud by itself as an all-in solution, I think that would take a while.
I wanted to jump in on this one. First, I think every night before Satya Nadella goes to sleep, I think he tells himself, tomorrow's the day we convince everybody to go to the cloud. And then he wakes up the next morning, and when his feet hit the floor, that's his goal. I think Microsoft would love nothing more than that. But I think they're realistic, and they know that that's not going to happen. And I think that's something that they've realized over the last couple of years. It feels to me like their marketing 2 years ago was everybody and everything to the cloud. And then there were a whole bunch of really legitimate reasons why people couldn't do that. And then like a year and a half ago, they said, how about everybody to hybrid? How about just stick your toe in a little bit? And I think that's where their focus is going to be. And if you read that Julia White thing, That's very much where they're going with the next version. The other thing is there's been a lot of people who read that yesterday, and they're like, oh my goodness, thank goodness, there's going to be a next version. Microsoft has said publicly multiple times in the last year that there would be another on-prem version of SharePoint. So it wasn't a big groundbreaking announcement yesterday. There's a lot more detail than we've been seeing, but I never had any doubt that that was going to happen.
So, Todd, I don't think I...
Yeah.
Go ahead, I was going to say, I don't think I agree with Todd that Satya wakes up every day thinking this this is the day where everybody will go to the cloud. In fact, I think he wakes up every day saying this is the day where everybody will go hybrid, because if you look at it from a business perspective, Microsoft has a fantastic, compelling story that no other competitor would have today. I mean, if you look at Google, obviously their story is straight cloud, right? If you look at other big competitors, which right now they're partners like Oracle, they have all on-prem stories. Salesforce is straight cloud. Whereas with this, hybrid is just a great compromise between both worlds. So I think from a business perspective, they should continue to push that story and be more loud about it.
Yeah, Dux, I think I was gonna mention the same thing there. I think that whether they knew it, just realized it, or whether they just remembered it, the fact that this hybrid story, sort of any way you like it, mix it and match it is really one of the compelling stories that Microsoft has over some of their competitors. So I think that however it happened, they're certainly going to be singing that song, and I think it's going to be loud and clear over the next 6 or 7 months as we lead up to the next release.
Awesome. I think that's I think we live in a time where I think Microsoft's there to make money, and we all agree to that. I think they're very realistic about the marketplace and who's the different companies. Cloud works for some people, cloud doesn't work for other people. So I mean, they're not going to. I think it would be a little bit premature to think that they're just going to put all their eggs in one basket and forget about. I'm not sure what the total revenue or the SharePoint business is, but it's pretty big, and there's still a lot of people on-prem, so they're not going to turn their back on those folks. And but we'll see what happens. Hey, Dux, I got one more question for you, and I think this kind of speaks to something that you would probably be pretty familiar with, since you're a world traveler and work in the public sector. Someone asked the question, will Microsoft guarantee that SharePoint and the cloud data will stay on servers in the USA as some clients require that? I mean, I think that you can extend this conversation or extend this communication or question to be, if you're a European company or you're somewhere else and you need your information to stay, within the country, does Microsoft make sure that, that's going to be something that's going to happen?
That's another big conversation I had today with 2 customers, where certainly because of laws around the country, certain information has to stay. For example, in the U.S., Microsoft has made a lot of great investment to create in provision government versions of their cloud offerings. So there's Office 365 for government. There's OneGov Cloud, which is Azure for government. Sierra is not available for government, but again, those are specific to the U.S. government. There's some investment in different parts of the world to do the same, but overall, certainly they won't be able to do the same thing for every country or every jurisdiction. The guidance that Microsoft provides to places where they don't have their in-country version of the Microsoft Cloud offering is they would advise, certainly, if anything that has to be compliant with legal or government regulations, they would recommend that you keep that on-prem. And any workloads or any type of other data that's not as sensitive or is not an issue, then they pitch a cloud story. So essentially, in those regions or those types of situations, Microsoft themselves are pitching hybrid.
Yeah, I think that's all good advice. There's a number of questions that we have, and right now we're at 21 questions. So what I'm going to try to do is we've got about 25 minutes left, and I'm going to try to sort of take some of the questions and sort of group them together so that we can make sure that we try to answer as many people's questions, as we can. So I'll say that I think one of the big questions is around, there's several questions around security. Someone asked, is security a concern for the public cloud, such as Office 365? And other people ask about, what is the solution for mitigating insider data theft attacks in the cloud? A bunch of questions just around the cloud and security. Jeff DeVerter, I know that in your position when you were over on working on the SharePoint side of things, I know the cloud has always been, when we talk about customers' data in our data centers and everything like that, I mean, obviously on our side, protecting customers' data is such a big deal, and I know Todd spoke to it before. But from a business perspective, from the strategy perspective, what do you tell customers? Is the cloud safe?
Yeah, so it's as safe as they engineer it or architect or give us the requirements that it needs to be. So, the first thing to think about when you think about going to another data center with your data for SharePoint is how do you want your customers to access that? We've got a lot of customers who have things so tied down that nothing is available via the public internet. It's only available if they are on their own corporate LAN and traveling across, a dedicated pipe that's coming in through, a secure router through, and even a lot of times in through a dedicated lease line where they've extended their own wide area networks into a Rackspace data center directly to the rack where their data is stored. So for all intents and purposes, that data is in their own data center. There really isn't a way to access that and connect to it in other ways. Other customers don't have that stringent of requirements. Obviously, anytime that your requirement list grows, the amount that it's going to cost to facilitate that goes up. But that's where our customers are able to make their own business decisions to know if, one, they need that level of security, and two, what are they going to either save and or gain by having in our case, the experts at Rackspace, the likes of Todd Clint, be the guys who are helping to architect and manage their SharePoint environments. In a lot of cases, obviously, for our customers, they've decided that there's more pluses than negatives on that side.
Yes. Hey, Todd. What is your take on this? I know you talked a little bit about security and everything like that, but for what we were talking about, being that the definition of cloud, has a lot of meanings and everything like that. I would imagine, if you're talking about, Office 365 security, I think Microsoft has been very strong in their commitment to making sure that that environment is safe and secure, and they're doing everything that they can. And then I would assume, would you agree that for anything else, it would be all the other clouds? What is your feeling on security of, all cloud platforms, I guess, as it relates to SharePoint?
So that's a tough question because I don't know that there are very many other SharePoint cloud offerings. So SharePoint Online is obviously the big one. Rackspace is number 2. And I think there's a couple of other ones, but there's not a lot of those out there. SharePoint's a pretty complicated product, and once you get into the multi-tenant version, it gets complicated, or it's even tougher to manage. I will tell you that at Rackspace, over the last couple of years, Jeff and I have had a lot of fun with some customers who've had some very strict security requirements, trying to figure all of that out. It's been a great intellectual exercise for us to figure out how to get the customer the security that they want and still keep, SharePoint running and all that kind of stuff. And we've done a pretty good job with that. It's made us put our thinking hats on, and it's been a lot of fun. But we do that kind of stuff. I know Microsoft at the SharePoint conference last year, Bill Baer did a session on some of the security stuff they did, and it was like right out of a science fiction novel. So they do some stuff where they, the documents and things that are uploaded into SharePoint are shredded. That's an on-prem thing as well as Office 365. But then SharePoint Online takes those shreds, they encrypt each of them, which is nice. They encrypt each of them with a different key, which is super crazy complicated. And then those keys are distributed to different data centers. So if anybody, like if a rogue worker at one of those places would be able to snag a hard drive, they wouldn't be able to get anything off it. It'd be gibberish. It would look like my homework did when I was in 3rd grade. operate. It would be worthless. So security is a huge thing, and places like Rackspace and Microsoft and everybody else know that that's people's number one concern. And with the stories of the Sony hack and all that, it's just getting to be a bigger deal. So they're doing everything they can to make customers feel good and keep data safe.
So we got a bunch of questions here. In my continuing efforts to try to group questions so that we can make sure we get to as many people as we can, I'd say we have at least 3 questions that are around hybrid. And I know everybody on the panel has talked about hybrid. Ducks mentioned it as a great option for customers who can't move 100% of their data to the cloud. What is everybody's thoughts on hybrid in SharePoint as it stands today? Is that something that customers should be looking into? Is it a good fit for everybody? And I'll start with Todd because I know we've had conversations about it and you've looked into it. What are your IT pro thoughts these days on hybrid and where it stands?
I think hybrid's great, and I think that not enough people are doing it now. Not enough people are investigating it now. I just did a talk at a local user group last week or the week before that was just an hour long on here's all your hybrid options and here's why you should do them. And I think it seems like every month when patches come out and Office 365 gets updated and things like that, there are more hybrid options. So if somebody's looked at hybrid 6 months ago, a year ago, I would ask them to look again because there's probably more options there than you thought that there were. But it's great because it lets you move to the cloud at a speed that you're comfortable with. And it allows you to do things like put the collaboration stuff out in the cloud, but keep my social security number, and my first pet, keep all that stuff safe on-prem if you feel that's more safe. But it's going to be a bigger and bigger thing. The next version of SharePoint's going to have more of it. And I think people need to give it more attention.
All right. Hey, Ducks, when we have some other questions about hybrid, and I think what Todd said was, 100% agree with what he's saying. In your customers and for everybody that's listening, when we talk about hybrid, if we break that down to, at a strategic level, what are you advising your customers on the type of things that should be in the cloud? I mean, functionally speaking, what type of things should people be doing, say, in Office 365 or in that type of environment, which compared to what are the other types of things that they're leaving on-prem?
Sure. So one of the low-hanging fruits is, and this is true regardless if you're in the public sector or commercial, is one of the quick wins and quick hits you could do in the cloud through a hybrid scenario is the external collaboration scenario. So, for example, in the area where you do, again, projects, when you collaborate with either partners or customers and you need a way to work together in a
do we lose
platform to do that.
Uh-oh.
Hello?
There he is. Hey, we dropped out there
Sorry.
for a second.
Yeah, so low-hanging fruit around external project collaboration, that's a good scenario. And second is if there's a need or around just basic ad hoc team-like collaboration where you don't have to deal with any type of compliance, and start there. Down the road, as technology improves, as some of the compliance challenges that may have been addressed, I think that's where you look into bigger and more complex business use cases and workloads. And then the other advice I typically provide is certainly Microsoft has a great cloud platform. It's scalable. But just like on-premise, consider solutions from Microsoft partners as well. Because as we all know, Microsoft provides a great foundation, great platform, but for your specific needs, there's a whole wide array of partners that can fulfill and provide you the cloud solution, hybrid solution, and that may address some of your trepidation around taking advantage of a hybrid scenario.
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry. I just wanted to wade in here because John, I see those questions. We do have quite a few questions right on hybrid. So one of the things that I just wanted to sort of expand out a little bit is that, the tendency up to now has been to think of hybrid as this kind of, binary relationship. I have some things that are on-premise and I have some things that are in an Office 365 tenant. And I think that we've got to, the world is becoming more complex, and we've got to start thinking about the term hybrid to have a much broader sense, right? Because I may have one or more Office 365 tenants. I might be storing some of my SharePoint workloads on Rackspace. I might be storing some of my SharePoint workflows, workloads on premise. So I think we have to think about hybrid as any time we have more than one SharePoint deployment going on at any one time that we need to work across. And, while that gives us a lot of capability, I use SharePoint, I use Office 365 where I want it, as Dux was saying, maybe in a partner extranet scenario. I have my Rackspace installation where I can do all of my deep customizations that Office 365 doesn't allow. I have all that capability, but hybrid brings with it complexity, right? Because we're expanding out. Now I have multiple farms. Think about the user experience. How do I know where I'm supposed to create a site, right? If I have access to multiple different places where I can interact with SharePoint, how do I know where I'm supposed to do various things? So up to now, I think that the promise of hybrid has been great, but the tools and the mechanisms to make that an easily supportable and easily usable deployment, those things are coming along a little bit slower than the story is. And so I think, with Microsoft, what we'll probably see going forward, if we can read between the lines of Julia's blog post yesterday, I think they're going to invest there in terms of better manageability and integration of these farms. We saw a little bit of that with the SP1 version of SharePoint 2013, where they're fixing a little bit of the, hey, I can put my OneDrives in the cloud and keep my main SharePoint on-premise, and maybe I can aggregate my search results in a way that's a little bit better from an end-user experience when they're searching across both. But the hybrid story is one of capability and also one of management and user interaction. So we've got to think about, how do I enable users to use this environment once I've got it stood up?
Yeah, I think you went to the exact question that I was looking at, which was about, kind of demystifying some of that idea about hybrid. And I know just, if I put on, my Rackspace hat for a second, when we talk about hybrid, like you said, is more simply, two SharePoint environments, whether they're, even in a customer's data center and at Rackspace, or, is it, between, say, some on-prem environment and Office 365. Like you can slice and dice that, that hybrid idea many different ways. And it's a whole new world and a whole new set of skill sets, and there's a whole bunch of questions, and we're not really going to go into some of the details about some of these, some of the questions around customizations in the cloud and things like that. But I'm sure everybody on this call would agree that when you talk about creating hybrid environments, they're more complex. And the architecture and how you create functionality that works across hybrid environments, it's a different skill set. It's hard. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. But hey Todd, why don't you? What do you think if you're thinking about going into one of these hybrid setups? I mean, what advice would you give to an admin or an organization that was possibly considering going to one of these hybrid setups where, a couple of years ago when you first started in the dark ages of SharePoint, it was all, we all installed it on one server. Now we're talking about, bigger farms in clouds, not in clouds, and doing, development and everything is, hard and different. Like, where would be your advice on trying to figure out how you can best leverage the cloud to get the most out of SharePoint?
Well, so my advice, sadly, is not as exciting as I wish it was. So I wish my advice was get in there, start clicking stuff. For my IT Pro buddies, start clicking next a lot, finish a lot. But I think in reality what my advice is look over what your hybrid options are and see what ones make sense for you. See which options scratch an itch that you have. So for instance, one of the things that you can do is you can move your My Sites out of your on-prem SharePoint 2013 farm and into OneDrive for Business. And so if you've been struggling with space for My Sites, but you want people to use them, but they take up so gosh darn much space, that would make a great thing for you to do. So my advice is to look at what your options are, see what things intrigue you the most, pick one, because it's kind of complicated. especially getting that authentication piece figured out for some of it, and make some deliberate steps and do what you can to ensure your success so you don't leave a bad taste in management's mouth and your users' mouths and all that. But go out there, find some of the cool hybrid options that there are, and pick one that's going to have a big return, and try that. And then, let that bake a little bit. And once you've got your feet underneath you, then start adding a little bit more to your hybrid plate, because there's so much there, and I think just finding that one big win is better for you and better for your users.
So I think one of the questions that's not that people haven't asked, this is my own question, and I'm going to kind of toss it out there. I'm sure a lot of people that are on the webinar, they're coming here, they're looking for advice and kind of figuring out, where should I start? I mean, cloud is, one of the most pervasive buzzwords that I think everybody that's listening and on the call hears. So I'll toss this question over to Dux. If you're a company that, you're a CIO, or, you're someone in there that's really, trying to think about how can I move to cloud? I hear it's going to be a great cost savings. Where would you, how would you advise a customer or a company to start planning their strategy for moving to the cloud? And just as kind of, when you're going through and you're answering, I think there's a question where somebody's asking about, is there real savings in the cloud?
Sure.
So what do you tell your customers about that?
So the way I go through that thinking is at first I look at who the customer is and talk to them about, okay, what are your business drivers for this year?
Nope, I think we lost you for a second again. Oh, you're back.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're back again.
Okay. So I go through the process with my customers first asking, what's your business drivers for this year, even before the cloud conversation? And is this a year where you're going to expand, make money, save money? What is it? And then off of that, off of their business drivers, what they're focused on, now we look at, from a technology investment, is infrastructure your core business? And most of the customers I work with, unless they're Rackspace, most likely infrastructure is not their core business. Their core business might be in serving the public or making some widget. And then I talk about, okay, if infrastructure is not your core business, then let's look at what are you spending today, and how much money can you save, or how much gains can you get? Because sometimes it's not just even about saving money. The fact that you can go to market and ramp up a solution right away in the cloud is much faster than physically setting up infrastructure or hiring people to take care of it. So I go through that thought process: is what are your business drivers? Is infrastructure your core business? And if not, what's holding you back? Is this legal reasons or security reasons and whatnot? And then off of that, then we start the conversations. Okay, it makes sense for you to go to the cloud, and these are the steps on how you could do it, what investments you should make. And again, it goes back to what are they trying to do with their organization.
I think that's some solid advice. So we're down to about 8 minutes, and I want to ask. I want to get to one more question that someone asked. This is one of the first questions that came in, and it's got Jeff DeVerter's name written all over it. But I want to ask Jeff one question. Then I'm gonna after he's done, I got a question that I want everybody to kind of go around the panel and we'll close things out with. So Jeff. Someone asked the question, if I enter into cloud, am I getting into vendor lock-in? Since the technology is changing, how difficult to get out of the cloud after a few years? Will that hurt me the most? And, I know we talk about that at Rackspace all the time, is, this idea of vendor lock-in. And what's your advice there?
So great question, and I'll use my favorite answer for answering a SharePoint question, that is, it depends. So it depends on the level of autonomy that you keep in your SharePoint deployment. So the most autonomous and the most non-vendor lock-in is to leave it in your own data center. Now, as we start to step a little farther outside of your data center, you come to a Rackspace data center in a dedicated deployment. Dedicated deployment means you have your own servers, routers, SQL servers, storage arrays, that sort of stuff. So it's your own SharePoint deployment. So do you have vendor lock-in in this situation? You don't. The reason you don't is because they're your content databases. Remember, everything in SharePoint is stored in a content database predominantly that you get to just pick up and take wherever you want. You want to bring it back home? Take it back home. You want to go elsewhere with it, migrate along, you can migrate elsewhere. You know, you add to that the fact that with our partnership with AvePoint now, and the ability to have AvePoint technology baked into your deployment here, you know, there's all sorts of backups and replication and synchronization capabilities that come with that. So you want to span multiple providers so that you've got redundancy across providers. You know, the core parts of the infrastructure are there to help pull that together. Now, as you go farther down into the world of cloud and leave dedicated deployments into multi-tenant deployments, you're going to have to work with a vendor-by-vendor case to understand how portable they're going to let your data be. Now, at Rackspace, you know, we write white papers that talks about how you leave us. If you need to leave us to go, you know, go back in-house, you want to go to another provider, you want to go to 365. We help you make that happen. We believe that you shouldn't be locked into anything. We believe that ultimately it's your data anyway, and who are we to stake claim for that? So what's the answer on vendor lock-in? It depends, and you should absolutely ask that question before you sign a contract.
Awesome, good advice. So we have got 5 minutes. I'll plan that. Jeff, you answered that question in the perfect amount of time. So we've got 5 minutes left. And we've got so many questions that I know we couldn't get to everybody's question. I put a comment at the bottom that if anybody has any questions, like if we mentioned some resources, I know there was the on-prem versus Office 365 feature comparison. If you ask that question or you want a link to the direct article, feel free to email me directly. My email address is john.ross@rackspace.com. Shoot me an email. I'd be glad to get the link out to you so you can share that information. But like I said, I got one more question that I want to ask the panel, and it's not really a question anybody's asked. But I was asked this question a couple weeks ago. I thought it was awesome, and I've been kind of like saving this one. So the question is, you know, what do you think the trend for companies with SharePoint in 2015 is going to be? Where do you see companies investing? I mean, look into your crystal ball, you know, read the tea leaves a little bit, and what do you see people investing in? And so I'll start with, we're going to go around to everybody. I'll start with Jon Peluso.
Yeah, so I think that one of my top hits here is, you know, it could be biased by, you know, I do a lot of work with customers around governance and compliance of content in SharePoint, but we've already seen this trend start, and I heard the other day, see if this sounds weird, right? So I was talking to a customer, and they said, well, we've got to get a bunch of content into SharePoint. I said, okay, why do you need to do that? And they said, well, we have these other systems, but SharePoint is going to become our system of record. So here were people, right, the days of taking content out of SharePoint to put it in a records archiving place have shifted now that people are taking content from other systems and bringing it into SharePoint because SharePoint is the ECM solution. So I think that's one of the areas that I'm seeing, you know, I've seen a big uptick over the last year, and we see it continuing into the new year is people really focusing on information lifecycle and retention of content, as well as disposal of content that is sitting in SharePoint as well as that they bring into SharePoint for that purpose. I think that's going to be big this year.
Hey Todd, what's your crystal ball look like for 2015?
I see a lot of people moving their SharePoint farms to Rackspace. I'm just kidding. So I think 2015 is going to be an awkward space for a lot of folks because the new version's coming out, and so people, it's always odd to me. I just had a discussion with somebody a couple days ago how they're moving from 2010 to 2013. They're in the planning stage, and they're like, well, we might as well just stop because 2016 is going to be out. I'm like, well, it's not going to be out for like 9 months, and you're not going to install it the day that it comes out anyway. You're going to test it. You're going to do all the things you're doing now. You're going to do those again. You're not going to put 2016 in production for a year and a half, 2 years. But people get into that mindset. So I think it's going to be, I think people are going to get locked up a little bit this year, but I'm going to try to get people to get up to 2013, get patched to 2013, get their houses in order, you know, get their data and stuff in order and get ready for 2016 when it comes out, as well as, you know, figure out what what the hybrid or what the cloud means to them, and hopefully get some of that figured out. That's what I'm hoping people do this year.
Dux, what you thinking?
Yeah, so I'm thinking similar to what John mentioned is, and this is firsthand from a lot of the customers I'm working with, only 1 month in, is a lot of people are thinking about this concept of compliant migration. In public sector, a lot of folks are moving, believe it or not, 2007 to 2013, 2010 to 2013, but they're more cautious now and cognizant that they don't just move the stuff that they have. There's still this hopeful, idealistic view that once they migrate, they want it to be as best as it can be, where information architecture is correct, the taxonomy is laid out right, structure's right, because they've been burned before. But more importantly, the content that they move, they want it to be compliant. So I think people are more cautious of that now, and realize that it's very important that they don't want just garbage in, garbage out.
Jeff Verter, last but not least.
Last but not least, so where I really start to see things happening is I think that the days of the single all-in farm are kind of done. Todd talked to this earlier about breaking up your My Sites and putting that in OneDrive for Business. But I think that the utilization of stuff that's on-prem from a core system of record, the big mainframe data, whatever, or the warehouse that exists there, the stuff that has to remain private but they want to manage that goes to a Rackspace running in a Microsoft private cloud on top with SharePoint, and then consuming public cloud. I think we're starting to see the data broken up and put into repositories and distinct separate farms that serve the security and business purposes.
Awesome. Now, I said that I didn't want to poison the waters or whatever, but I said when somebody asked me the question, I said I think 2015 there's still a lot of people that are been kicking the tires on cloud, making sure that is it going to be a passing trend. And I think everybody's kind of biting into cloud, and I think everybody's sort of my prediction for 2015 was I think some people that have been on the fence are going to really take advantage of trying to leverage the cloud and find new ways. And I agree with just about everything that everybody said. I think whether it comes to compliance and migration and all those other pieces, I think folks are going to be getting off the fence, and this is going to be I think we're going to see a lot of people. Really, this is going to be 2015. I think is going to be the year when the masses are really, making a big shift. So I think that's a good way to end things. Just for everybody on the call, couple quick announcements. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to the panelists. Thank you to everybody for coming out. I hope there was some good information that we talked about. The webcast itself is being recorded. We'll be sure to share that information once we have the URL for the recording. So we'll get that out on social media and everything. So please keep a lookout for that. Also, this is meant to be the first in a series of 3 webcasts that we're going to be doing together. So the first session today was to talk about kind of high-level overarching topics. The next webinar will be in early to mid-March. So we'll have more information about that. And we're going to be diving into to other topics where we're going to dive a little bit deeper. Today was sort of more high level. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the more specific concerns that IT pros might have, and really look at and explore some of those issues. But if I want to thank our Dux and Jon Peluso for joining us today from AvePoint. If you have any questions, take a look at I got a slide up there right now that you can check out their website, email address for sales, or give them a call if you have any questions. Also, I mentioned in the bottom of the presentation, if you have any questions that didn't get answered, please feel free to email me directly, john.ross@rackspace.com, and I'll do my best to get an answer for you the best I can. And also, big thanks to everybody from Rackspace for helping to support this. I'm a Racker. Jeff DeVerter is a Racker. Todd Clint's a Racker. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Email us. Give me a call. Whatever you want. We're always happy to help. But I want to thank everybody.